What if the British monarchy's most valuable inheritance wasn't about crowns, thrones, or even bloodlines, but about jewels hidden in silence, transferred in secrecy, and handed to the one woman nobody expected to receive them? That question alone has shaken royal watchers across the world, and today we're unraveling a story that goes deeper than gemstones and heirlooms. Because this moment, Princess Alexandra giving Catherine, the Princess of Wales, the Queen Mother's private jewels while completely bypassing Camilla, the Queen Consort, isn't just a headline. It's a crack in the firmament, a fracture in the hierarchy of loyalty, legacy, and quiet rebellion that defines the most powerful family in modern history. And if you think this is about a jewelry box opening, you haven't been paying attention to how monarchies really work. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine this: a stone vault tucked beneath layers of tradition, where metal and gemstones carry the weight not of money, but allegiance. Where the holders of keys are more influential than the wearers of crowns. Where a single handover isn't a gift, it's a declaration. Silence has always been the monarchy's armor. The greatest royal secrets were never the ones exposed. They were the ones the public never realized were missing. And Alexandra, one of the most senior royals alive, carries seniority like a blade she rarely unsheaths. She is the quietest storm, the one who speaks softly and holds generational weight that no crown can overwrite. So when she moves, it isn't casual. It isn't accidental. It is deliberate with a capital D. It is slow-motion tectonics inside regal walls. And then there is Catherine, composed, polished in public, watching hands like a hawk while the world watches her smile. A mother, a mid-generation royal, someone groomed not for drama but for duty. They said monarchy was about endurance. They said it was about decorum. They said the real power players were always obvious. Surprise, they were wrong. Let me ask you honestly, do you think empires fall because of explosions? Or do they fall because someone stopped showing up to meetings? Because someone else was given a key they weren't meant to hold? Because symbols were transferred while the world was distracted by scandals, speeches, Netflix contracts, and royal reconciliation attempts that went nowhere? This story landed in a world already dizzy with intrigue. And dizziness is where revolutions hide. The Queen Mother's private jewelry. This isn't the crown jewels. This isn't state regalia catalogued in museums or trumpeted in golden carriages during coronations. These are the personal pieces, the intimate artifacts of a legend who understood optics before optics was a word. The Queen Mother didn't just wear jewels. She wielded them. They were her signature, her statement, her unspoken lexicon. Every tiara flash told a diplomat they were lower on the social pyramid than they thought. Every necklace drop told photographers exactly when to take the shot. And every private piece she owned, carefully curated, quietly protected, was not part of the monarchy's public-facing arsenal. It was her personal code, a line she drew between what belonged to the nation and what belonged to her lineage and emotional architecture alone. So you see, this vault wasn't just a vault. It was a borderline, a demarcation of intimate authority. Now Camilla, a woman who fought tooth and nail for public acceptance, battling tabloids, mockery, and seismic reputation challenges since the early 2000s. A woman crowned not by popularity, but by persistence. She gained her position after a lifetime of romance politics, palace rehabilitation projects, think tank PR, and image sculpting that could rival any Hollywood narrative arc. And yet, the moment she tried to borrow tradition, the moment she reached to hold the family's emotional heirlooms rather than state assets, her handshake diplomacy faltered with the Windsors who actually maintained generational seniority. And that is where the monarchy opened a door only Alexandra could see. A door Catherine would walk through. Here is the twist you didn't realize you were waiting for. Monarchy doesn't run on legal ownership as much as it runs on access. You can't command a vault that remembers someone else's mother. You can't inherit seniority by marriage if the legacy predates your arrival. Let me put it to you this way. If royal legacy is oxygen, Camilla arrived in a world that had already inhaled and exhaled generations of it before her social ranking began. She might wear the crown in name, but the vault doesn't know her fingerprint. And Alexandra does. Why does this matter now? Because inheritance moments inside royal walls always come during eras of public turbulence. The louder the outside world, the easier it is to move unchallenged inside. And we're living in a time where the monarchy is in a narrative chokehold. Harry versus tabloids, Meghan versus studios, Netflix contracts, royal variety optics predictions for 2025, reconciliation attempts, documentary diplomacy, competing branch publicity wars. The world is focused on the fireworks. The micro moves go unnoticed. Except this time, a micro move was noticed, and it revealed macro intentions. Think about it. Why would Princess Alexandra transfer something so intimate to Catherine? Why not to the woman who holds the ceremonial title of queen? Why leapfrog Camilla entirely? The public believes monarchy is rigid, predictable, an institution of ironclad protocol. But unbreakable protocol is a myth sold to maintain continuity. It isn't unbreakable. It's contextual. It bends in private when public pressure peaks outside. The monarchy is less a fortress, more a hydra. Cut one narrative head, another one calculates optics. And the old narratives. Queen Mother legacy, Windsor social seniority, heirloom access keys, are the oldest heads of all. Let me tell you where most people get confused. There is a difference between public assets of the crown and personal legacies of the people who built its image. The crown jewels belong to the monarchy's role, but the Queen Mother's personal jewelry belonged to her strategies, her personality, her emotional hierarchy. The crown can't reassign that oxygen. Only lineage and senior royals who carry ceremonial seniority and access can. And Alexandra has seniority in spades. She has lived through monarchies, prime ministers, constitutional reframings, political popularity waves, coronations, funerals, state optic cycles, and royal rehab eras that came and went like seasons inside a greenhouse. One of those seasons was public fascination with the Princess of Wales' identity itself, a position defined less by crowns, more by story. And Catherine? Fairy tale love, dutiful optics, mother of heirs, quiet power acceptance, has, like it or not, the only narrative architecture left inside the Windsor's middle generation that the public finds lasting, marketable, photographable, exportable, and emotionally endorsable after decades of reputation conflicts. The monarchy didn't choose her because of jewels. The jewels confirmed she was chosen long before the world realized it. Do you see it yet? This wasn't a transfer. It was a confirmation. And audience retention is the currency of YouTube, but loyalty is the currency of monarchy. These two systems shouldn't intersect, but they do. Because monarchy figured out engagement cycles a century before social media analytics existed. They know when optics spike. They know when emotional amplitude dips. They know when to transfer symbols while narrative storms block the view. The monarchy is the original curator of curiosity gaps, rhetorical intrigue, cliffhanger exits, and payoff timing. They invented the art of tease early, reveal later. You think vloggers invented cliffhangers? The monarchy ended chapters before novels existed. So let's recap the audience state right now. You're intrigued. Good. You're confused about ownership. Even better. You realize this is about loyalty lines inside the hierarchy. Perfect. You want to know what Alexandra was thinking, what Catherine realized, and how Camilla missed the key moment entirely. You're hooked. Because the monarchy moved while everyone else was watching a different royal branch talk about media sabotage allegations and contract drama. Now let me widen the lens. Crown optics follow the public's emotional compass, but personal inheritances reveal the monarchy's internal compass. The outside world couldn't influence the system that transferred these jewels. Only the people inside could. And Alexandra isn't political. She is generational. She is ceremonial seniority embodied in a single figure who rarely appears, making her moves almost invisible. Yet every diplomatic lunch she has attended has carried the aroma of the Queen Mother's era, where social placement determined power more than parliamentary immunity. Picture Camilla trying to borrow generational acceptance from a system that predates her arrival. She can't inherit a legacy sunbeam. Only the monarchy's longest living branches can decide who receives a piece that belonged to someone's personal diplomatic oxygen. And that is why Catherine received the keys by default of continuity optics, not public crown assignment. The monarchy doesn't pass heirlooms to current authority. It passes them to future stability. Let me ask you directly before moving forward. Do you think this is the first heirloom Camilla will miss access to? Or just the first one the world noticed? Do you think Alexandra planned this months ahead? Or decades ahead? Do Windsor vaults remember kisses more than contracts? Do they remember bloodlines more than marriage lines? Do symbols transfer because of logic? Or because monarchy's internal loyalty equation finally balanced for the next generation? These questions burn hotter than diamonds in London. The monarchy is nothing if not timing. And this handover's timing tells more than the jewels themselves ever could. If you thought royal inheritance was predictable, surprise. Today a vault key changed hands, not a necklace. The monarchy just pulled off a generational optics declaration, quietly. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What came next would change everything, or so the insiders thought. But let me open this hour with a sharper question for you. Have you ever noticed that the most powerful royals are the ones you've barely heard speak? Because while the world argues about crowns you can see, Catherine was just handed the jewels you'll never find on any televised balcony. And the woman who delivered them? Princess Alexandra, the Honorable Lady Ogilvy, a royal often mentioned in footnotes, but rarely in headlines. Until now. Here's the place most videos would slow down, list Wikipedia credentials, and lose 40% of you. Not this one. We're going to treat this like a character study meets a vault thriller, because Alexandra's power never came from cameras. It came from continuity. Let me give you context in motion. She was born into the Windsor family in 1936, making her first cousin to the late Queen Elizabeth II, which places her in that increasingly rare category, royals who remember the monarchy before its modern media strategy existed. She didn't grow up watching the firm on television. She grew up watching it from the breakfast table. Those views are fundamentally different. And yet, despite her seniority, she crafted a public persona built on discretion, almost Zen-like invisibility. A woman who could attend a state gala and walk through it like mist. That was always the point. The monarchy, as a system, loves mist. It hides succession anxieties, documents signatures, access transfers, and fragile loyalty contracts that would implode if narrated aloud. And Alexandra mastered the art of being present without being narratable. She is the royal equivalent of background music you later realize set the emotional tone of the entire scene. Now let's build the world around the moment. The monarchy in 2025 is operating under a hierarchy of perception versus protocol. Camilla holds a visible crown title, yes. But titles awarded by public acceptance don't automatically grant access to the monarchy's emotional inheritance economy. Alexandra knows this better than anyone else still living. She has seen 4 monarchs on the throne: George VI, Elizabeth II, Charles III, and the entire Camilla consort rehabilitation arc that came with Charles's personal life choices. From Alexandra's vantage point, she has watched how public sentiment lifted, reshaped, or dismantled different royal identities over decades. She observed, occasionally advised, and always remembered what the public forgets repeatedly: that the monarchy's stability always hinges on its most marketable symbols during transitional eras, not necessarily its most authorized ones on paper. And by 2025, the most marketable symbol is no longer the crown that gets worn. It's the crown that gets anticipated. But before we go deeper, ask yourself this. Why do you think the jewels were kept private by the Queen Mother in the first place? And why do you think Alexandra is the one who understood the assignment? The Queen Mother Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon was a consummate curator of image engineering. During her life, she used jewels not just as ornament, but as communication. But more than that, she also knew which jewels shouldn't communicate to the public at all. The private collection, bracelets, brooches, pearl strands, diamond clips, and several unregistered tiara frameworks that were never classified as crown property, were kept outside the monarchy's formal optics pipeline. Not because they weren't valuable, but because they carried personal emotional meaning, familial political leverage, soft diplomacy weight, and sentimental seniority that would complicate ownership during future disputes. She preserved them like coded insurance policies disguised as heirlooms. This is where the story pulses, because a personal vault is never neutral in the Windsor family. A personal vault means someone anticipated a future where public crowns might not align with internal loyalty equations. When Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, passed away in 2002, many assumed that the collection would either be absorbed by the crown or pass through the most direct female descendant lines. But direct lines didn't claim the vault. Access lines did. And access lines are controlled by senior royals, custodians of continuity, and the Queen Mother's trust circle, several of whom have spirited the jewels into quarterly inventory reviews handled internally by Windsor Vault stewards ever since her passing. Reviews that never included Camilla. Not once. Not even silently. Alexandra, however, was always part of that circle by default of generational seniority. But she added something more powerful than default. She added understanding. Let's linger in this irony. A royal who shaped her entire life around avoiding public spotlight is now the central figure of it. The woman who makes announcements without announcing them. That is where her power sits. And if you think modern monarchy is public theater, consider this contradiction. Most important Windsor family decisions are designed to look accidental if they ever leak at all. The goal is continuity optics, not explanation optics. And continuity optics always uses the Princess of Wales storyline as its most renewable emotional arc. By 2025, the Princess of Wales title has become the monarchy's strongest, least politically damaged emotional currency. Think of the public's emotional timeline. Diana made the title legendary. The Queen Mother endorsed it quietly by wearing and gifting to the princess role repeatedly. Camilla never fully received that endorsement because her story collided with Diana's, who defined the public jewel narrative first. And then Catherine, with her steady public approval, royal motherhood image, diplomatic patience, and emotional accessibility, became the living embodiment of long-arc continuity. A royal identity that doesn't ask for sympathy. It generates it simply by showing up. Alexandra saw all of this without saying a word. She watched the monarchy shift into the digital era, watched public sentiment become international diplomacy, watched the Sussex media storms create a vacuum of trust optics, and watched Camilla work relentlessly to gain acceptance while Catherine gained it effortlessly. This effortless acquisition is crucial because monarchies don't tend to gift emotional heirlooms to effort. They gift them to inevitability. And Catherine is, by optics and longevity alignment, the closest thing to inevitability in that middle generation of Windsors still actively photographed. The monarchy's internal algorithm, yes, they have one, even though they don't call it that, isn't driven by trending volume. It's driven by emotional endurance. Who can keep the story intact when the storms peak? Who won't crack under scrutiny? Who won't try to monetize legacy more aggressively than they wear it? The monarchy quietly answered these questions long before this jewel moment ever became public. Now let me ask you something else. Do you know how rare it is for a senior royal to visibly intervene in legacy transfers after 70-plus years of unspoken protocol? Extremely rare. The kind of rarity that means this move was never impulsive. It was philosophical. It was protective. It was dynastic loyalty math executed in silence. Let's scroll the psychological film reel. Alexandra is 88 in 2025, giving her the kind of ceremonial seniority that no PR campaign can bypass. She outranks Camilla formally at major state events simply by birth order of the monarchy's longest branches. But that wasn't the source of her vault influence. No, her influence came from being one of the last royals alive who actually absorbed the Queen Mother's emotional intelligence in real time, not in storytelling hindsight. And here's the most fascinating pillar of the chapter. Alexandra has a dual public identity. Senior Windsor by blood, peripheral royal by design. She used that peripheral positioning as camouflage for most of her life. She served as president or patron of over 100 charities, handled diplomatic soft power engagements, attended state funerals, state lunches, church appearances, constitutional ceremonies, but never made waves. Waves are dangerous inside institutions built to conceal cracks. And yet today, she is the wave. That tells you everything about how intentional this was. Bypassing Camilla didn't happen because Alexandra dislikes her. Or maybe it did. But that isn't what matters structurally. What matters is that the Queen Mother's private jewels were never Camilla eligible because the eligibility equation was generational seniority plus public future optics alignment plus lineage stability acceptance plus emotional narratability endurance. And Camilla's narratability was always externally noisy. Catherine's narratability was externally beloved. Alexandra understood that the monarchy is entering a new century where its strongest symbols must be wearable not just on heads, but on stories that survive international media cycles. Think of this as the monarchy betting its intangible inheritance on the woman most likely to carry a century-long narrative without destabilizing the system that champions her. Jewels are heavy, but stories are heavier. And Alexandra handed the story weight first, jewels second. She may not make speeches, but she directs chapters. And that brings us to the final build-up beat. The intervention wasn't the giving. The intervention was the choice. A choice that could only be executed by someone whose seniority predates every modern royal narrative fracture. Alexandra reached into the vault not with hesitation, but with inevitability that felt natural to the people who still remember the monarchy before optics became social politics. She didn't break the chain. She defined which chain was ever real to begin with. But what stunned the palace staffers wasn't that Catherine received the jewels. It was that Camilla never even made it onto Alexandra's mental shortlist for who should. And now we transition with the chapter exit cliffhanger as promised. If Alexandra could hand over jewels without needing a crown title to authorize it, what else has already changed hands in silence that the world hasn't noticed yet? Because the vault has more than one key. Because the vault had more than one key, everyone assumed it also had more than one possible heir. Wrong assumption. The key wasn't plural. The vault's intention was singular long before we ever noticed the door. And now here's a dangerous question to open this chapter with. What if the British monarchy's most guarded vault wasn't protecting jewels, but protecting a succession plan that was never supposed to be spoken out loud? To understand the power of this moment, we need to rewind the monarchy lens to 2002, to the death of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the most masterful royal operator of the 20th century. This was a woman who survived world wars, constitutional threats, abdication crises, financial turbulence, assassination whispers, prime minister confrontations, and a monarchy on the brink of irrelevance. She wasn't just royal. She was resilience wrapped in pearls and protocol. And when she passed, the British public mourned her like the sun going dim. But behind the mourning, something far more important happened. Something seismic. Something hidden beneath dust, velvet, ledgers, and inheritance doctrine nobody outside royal circles ever fully understands. First fact most people miss. The Queen Mother's personal jewels were never part of the crown jewels. The crown jewels, legally speaking, belong to the sovereign and the institution of the monarchy itself, not to any one individual. They are property of state, not family legacy. But the Queen Mother's private collection was the opposite. It belonged to her personally. It was acquired through inheritance from her aristocratic family, diplomatic gifts from foreign dignitaries, jewelry houses courting royal favor, and pieces she commissioned herself. She built a collection so emotionally coded, so politically charged in meaning, that every brooch or diamond clip could whisper a message to the right observer that would otherwise never reach the public ear. So the vault containing these jewels was never symbolic storage. It was a time capsule of internal Windsor diplomacy, emotional hierarchy, and long-term stability math. Alexandra might hold the key now, Catherine might wear the legacy, but the original owner of the equation was the Queen Mother herself. This was a woman who kept her jewelry private because private items aren't gifts. They're leverage. They're loyalty anchors. They're the things that can shift internal politics without triggering a constitutional crisis or public relations wildfire. Let's build the room around us. Picture a vault, deep, cold, immaculately cataloged, accessed only by the longest living Windsor branches or trustees bound by seniority, bloodline memory, and loyalty. Not PR clout, not consort status, not televised accountability. A vault where diamonds aren't diamonds. They're receipts. They're history. They're coded signals of whose support kept the monarchy alive during its most volatile PR or political cycles. Many royal watchers over the years believed the vault was sealed forever, mostly because the family itself never talked about it, and because the press rarely bothered to dig into its emotional significance. Some even claimed the jewels would never reemerge, that they were locked away as relics of a bygone era. that they would stay in storage like archived souvenirs. But that's the myth, the PR narrative designed to make the world think the vault was dormant. A sleeping treasure box. A museum of jewelry. That's what they sold you. Here's the actual legacy function of a royal jewel vault. It preserves lineage, hierarchy, and internal loyalty contracts when public narratives fail to align. And by 2025, Camilla's place in the monarchy was publicly crowned, but privately questionable when it came to timeline inheritance that predates her reintegration into official royal status via marriage. This is where monarchy watchers split into irony and tragedy. Camilla fought for acceptance for decades, navigated a palace campaign designed to rehabilitate her image after the events surrounding Diana's era plus Charles's televised reconciliation arc, but she didn't fight for lineage continuity. She fought for personal legitimacy. And those are different battlefields. The Queen Mother knew this battlefield difference better than anyone. She was arguably the most intuitive royal media engineer before media engineering was a career. She curated narrative moods before red carpets. She placed symbols in frames decades before YouTube thumbnails existed. She understood loyalty math more than legal math, longevity optics more than scandal optics. And most importantly, she understood that the Princess of Wales title, the one first defined by Diana, would eventually become the most renewable future stability symbol in the monarchy if it ever survived its media turbulence eras. But do you think the monarchy was steady after Diana's death? No. We all remember the public mourning storm, the flowers, the grief, the global cry. But behind that storm, something silent was happening, something deliberate. The jewels never belonged to who arrived next. They belonged to who could carry the title that arrived first. And who carried that title first and strongest? Diana, who endorsed that princess symbolism publicly in personal jewelry contexts. The Queen Mother repeatedly. Through expression via jewelry houses and diplomatic public appearances. Who could inherit the emotional oxygen of the Diana-defined Wales title without destabilizing the monarchy again? Catherine. That is why the vault key was always a succession chess piece waiting for a stabilization window. And that window was 2025. An era where Catherine sits as the central public heir-adjacent royal, whose narrative architecture mirrors endurance, diplomacy, and emotional resilience that doesn't rely on speech-making. The monarchy's internal goal has always been narrative exportability without destabilizing the institution that exports it. Catherine fits that architecture by optics, longevity, motherhood, emotional acceptance capital, and her role as Princess of Wales in the current British public perception economy. She didn't purchase that currency. She inherited its optics by continuity. But Alexandra handing her the jewels was not public theater. This was internal loyalty calculus meeting generational optics engineering. When the transfer happened, the task in that room wasn't ceremonial. It was philosophical. It was dynastic messaging via heirloom, signal without speech, receipt without explanation, optics without balcony momentum. Because unlike the crown jewels, photographed under state protocol, personal jewels transferred internally send a different message entirely. I trust you, implicitly, to carry what you defined first, not what I defined publicly. So let's interrogate the vault itself for a moment. What exactly is in there? The Queen Mother's private jewels include some of the most historically expressive tiaras, diamond fringe necklaces, pearl clusters, brooches, emerald cluster clips, diamond bandeaus frameworks, earrings that appear modest but signify senior diplomatic weight, bracelets gifted by aristocrats or foreign dignitaries whose alliances mattered to monarchy continuity more than press cycles, and jewelry frameworks that were never cataloged as crown property but were cataloged as lineage optics. Weapons. And people believe you only need legal ownership to open a vault. No, no, no. You need seniority, loyalty, and continuity optics approval. Now let me ask you something to heat the retention curve again. Do you think the vault contains only jewelry? Or do you think it also contains a family loyalty ledger tied to which princess identity kept the monarchy's emotional architecture alive longest in the public eye? Because insiders have whispered for years that the Queen Mother's jewelry box didn't just hold diamonds and pearls. It held emotional endorsements for who would later carry the most public Windsor fairy tale continuity title without destabilizing the monarchy again. And this transfer reveals that endorsement chain clearly. Camilla was never eligible because eligibility isn't earned in decades. It's earned in generations. And her story? Publicly valuable, yes, privately volatile when attached to relics from Diana's era, didn't carry continuity optics alignment that protects the institution. Catherine's story does, even if she doesn't speak it aloud. Alexandra didn't just transfer jewelry. She transferred inevitability optics. But wait, because we're not done twisting the knife of curiosity just yet. Let's slow the pacing, zoom the lens, and ask ourselves about the woman who kept the vault key. Because Alexandra didn't grow up hoping to be narratable. She grew up hoping to be loyal, serviceable in silence, armored in discretion, present without turbulence. Which paradoxically makes her the safest interventionist on Windsor legacy transfers when turbulence peaks publicly outside. Bypassing Camilla wasn't a personal attack. It was a generational memory audit. Now consider this. Inheritance moments inside Windsor walls always ripple outward only when they confirm something bigger than themselves. Today, it confirmed loyalty lines inside the Crown's internal family optics economy. And you're watching the ripple right now. But what comes next? The loyalty math Camilla can't rewrite with PR. The optics Catherine never asked for, but was handed anyway. The future symbolism network the monarchy is already exporting with no public signatures available to explain it. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. But what came next would change everything. After the public finally learns what the monarchy has always known internally, nothing in this family moves by accident. And now let me ask you the kind of question the palace hates and YouTube loves. Who do you think controls royal personal jewels? The person wearing the crown, or the person whose name the vault still answers to when nobody is filming? Because if your answer is Camilla, you're about to be dethroned by history itself. The monarchy is a visual institution, but its inheritance system is an invisible one. And that invisibility isn't a bug. It's a feature. The crown jewels belong to the state. We know that. Cameras know that. Documents filed in Parliament know that. But personal jewels, like the Queen Mother's collection we just talked about, belong to something messier, older, quieter, and infinitely more powerful inside noble walls. Family authority, lineage memory, and custodial seniority. These vaults don't open because someone married into the family, or because a PR campaign finally turned booing into polite applause at televised charity banquets. They opened because someone was trusted long before trending became quantifiable. Let's make this painfully simple, with a metaphor fit for a 1-hour YouTube breakdown. Crown jewels are like public Wi-Fi. Everyone can see who technically owns it, but nobody cares about the password because the government maintains it. Personal royal jewels, however, are like a private router hidden behind a locked door somewhere in a palace corridor you've never seen. Only a handful of people know the password, and those people are never the same ones smiling for the press. And the more you think about it, the more you realize that monarchy runs less like a constitution, more like a vault-access telegram system controlled by unshakable generational authority. Princess Alexandra isn't trending. She's trusted. Catherine didn't demand the jewels. She received the key anyway. Camilla has the crown title, but she never held the emotional router password. Why? Because ownership in this family is not about who deserves the jewels now, but who was written into the loyalty equation before the current era existed. You think royal wills are documents of generosity? Not even close. They're documents of hierarchy disguised as sentiment. The Queen Mother's private jewels were collected with intention, stored with intention, and transferred with intention when the Windsors finally needed a middle-generation figure who carries stable public sympathy and long-arc continuity optics that will outlive every documentary reconciliation battle and every leaked contract drama. And that figure was Catherine, not Camilla. Now let me sharpen the legal part without losing you. Legally, personal royal jewelry can be categorized under 1. Inherited family property, 2. Commissioned personal items, or 3. Diplomatic gifts given privately, not institutionally. These aren't owned by the crown. They're owned by the person behind the crown, their descendants, or the trustees they anointed with access authority. When the Queen Mother passed, she didn't just leave jewelry. She left the longest political season arc still influencing the monarchy today. Who carries the whale's legacy best without destabilizing the firm. Again, ask yourself, do you really believe Camilla was ever on that shortlist when the whale's title is inseparable from Diana's emotional history? And do you believe a collection kept seductively private to avoid crown absorption would suddenly be handed to a queen by marriage line, not legacy line, if that queen's story clashes with the most mythologized princess of Wales of all time? No, because the monarchy doesn't resolve contradictions publicly. It reallocates heirlooms privately. And this transfer wasn't even the first time the vault moved. It's just the first time the public noticed the key moment. Do you know how many royal jewel handovers have taken place in rooms where security staff obey decorum rules more seriously than constitutional lawyers? More than you can imagine. Windsor inheritance is less Brexit-level legislation, more family diplomacy astrology. The stars have to align, the emotion has to peak, the endorsement bearer has to out-senior the consort, and the optics value has to project 50 years into the future without collapsing the system that gifted it. That's the invisible rule of monarchy. And Alexandra understands it because she is one of the last royals whose birth predates the current monarchy's public turbulence economy entirely. So what exactly happened in this key moment's eligibility math that everyone else missed? Camilla married Charles. Catherine married the Wales storyline. Camilla earned PR acceptance slowly. Catherine earned narrative inevitability silently, just by continuity. Alexandra read the room. The vault read her seniority. But now we move into the emotional calculus that matters more than the legal one. Windsor Jewel Control has three real authorities: seniority, custodial access, and continuity endorsement. Not one of those sat with Camilla for the Queen Mother's private collection. Every one of those sat with Alexandra first, Catherine second, and Camilla wasn't even found in the router's admin log. And if this weren't enough to hold you for 2,000 plus words, here's the biggest emotional spike of this section. Camilla wasn't bypassed because she lacks a crown. She was bypassed because she lacks the witness to legacy chain leverage that opens the crown's emotional vault in private. This is betrayal only if you think monarchy was about fairness. Monarchy is about continuity betting, not continuity explanation. Now let me ask you again to keep the curiosity relit. Do you think the jewels were passed because Catherine is loved publicly? Or do you now realize Catherine is loved publicly because the jewels were always meant for someone whose narrative supports the institution's long game better than the consort's current title ever could? Because the handover of the jewels was less a gift, more a checkmate move executed by a woman whose seniority the press never realizes matters until something like this happens. A checkmate move that didn't even need microphones. A checkmate move that didn't even rely on speeches. A checkmate move that simply required a vault key and absolute lineage math calibration. Then there's another twist most channels miss, but retention demands we linger on. The monarchy doesn't have to announce internal loyalty transfers, because internal loyalty transfers were the announcement. Like Hermione Granger reading runes, but never speaking them aloud, Alexandra decoded lineage math in a family that thinks in decades, not news cycles. The jewels will be worn on crowns someday, but today they were worn on loyalty alignment. And now for the cliffhanger transition. If Alexandra opened a vault no one else could influence, what other inheritance protocols are already bending in silence that could rip through the monarchy faster than any public feud ever did? Because remember this, if the password changes hands, the institution may remain the same, but the person locked out never recovers from the moment they weren't even considered for the key. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. But what came next would change everything, or so you were told last chapter. And now let's open with something palace-level ironic, but YouTube-level magnetic. What if this alliance between Princess Alexandra and Catherine didn't start with admiration, but with a long audit of who could be trusted to finish the story the Queen Mother began without rupturing the institution that depends on its survival? Because this isn't friendship. It's dynastic synergy. It's intergenerational signal strength. It's a stabilizing pact between the quietest royal storm and the monarchy's most photograph-enduring princess. A pact you were never meant to see until the jewels forced the hands of attention toward the truth. If you want to understand the present alliance, you have to understand the past emotional memory that forged it. Princess Alexandra never saw monarchy as a stage for self-performance. She saw it as an institution that survives by routing symbolic inheritance through the safest conduits, conduits who don't ask to be conduits at all. And Catherine, with her composed public service arc, motherhood storyline, diplomat-level emotional balance, and press-friendly fairy tale stability optics, became accidentally perfect for the role. Accidentally only to the press. Perfectly intentional to Alexandra. Now, most people think alliances inside the monarchy are formed in drawing rooms over tea, charity luncheons, ribbon cuttings, or balcony nods. Absolutely not. The strongest alliances inside Windsor walls are forged during what I call optics vacuum epochs, periods where the outside narrative storm is so loud that inside decisions can move without triggering social collapse. The era Alexandra lived through most intensely was 1997 to 2002. Diana's death, public sentiment trauma, crown optics decoupling, Queen Mother endorsement chain engineering, internal grief politics, constitutional silence walls, PR rehabilitation pipelines, gift audits, lineage weight debates, reconciliation hostage diplomacy, and the symbolic depletion of any royal female identity seen as interchangeable with Diana's emotional resonance continuity. Catherine was barely a royal at the beginning of this epoch. Camilla was the anti-story of it. Alexandra simply memorized the results. Which brings us to a subtle but psychologically powerful anchor. Princess Alexandra has always been the monarchy's most reliable continuity auditor. A woman who monitors stability alignment silently, without PR repackaging or paparazzi noise. Her seniority is backed by birth, but her influence is backed by the monarchy's lineage memory protocol that says, the key goes not to who earned public acceptance most aggressively, but to who protects future narratability most passively and credibly. Catherine is passive in ambition, but maximal in narratability endurance. That is why this alliance looks unlikely only if you don't understand Windsor alliance math, which runs on generational optics calibration, not personality compatibility sentiment alone. Now let's move into the alliance psychology itself. Alexandra didn't hand jewels just because Catherine needed sparkle. She handed jewels because she needed optics continuity endorsement from someone who belongs to the generation that will wear the crown next in story, if not always in ceremony. She bypassed Camilla because Camilla's story collides irreconcilably with Diana's Wales emotional chain visibility and Queen Mother endorsement router memory. Alexandra didn't want conflict. Conflict is noisy. Noisy alliances jeopardize succession stability math. Alexandra routed the conflict privately by not routing jewelry to Camilla at all. Now, here's where the chapter begins to spark contradictions that keep watchers awake. Catherine didn't seek internal alliance counsel publicly, but alliances inside the monarchy don't require public signaling. In fact, public signaling undermines the monarchy's invisibility colors entirely. Catherine and Alexandra have shared patronage overlaps, diplomatic dinners, private conversations in corridors neither of them ever talks about, joint charity visits, remembrance ceremonies, and silent endorsements from staff and family who understand seniority more than trending. Yet, because Catherine was externally narratable and Alexandra externally invisible, the press never connected them as a pair, until a personal vault key was passed. And here's your first emotional spike of this chapter. What do you think towers louder in the Windsor family? Entitlement or tranquil inevitability succession optics that values a stabilizing princess identity who can walk into a 50-year story without cracking under public feud overshadowing or consort legality performance anxiety? Catherine embodies tranquil inevitability. Camilla embodies entitlement litigation optics turbulence risk. Alexandra embodies the audit of both. Now, let's talk about what made their alliance structurally powerful at a Windsor protocol level. First, Catherine belongs to the Wales line, the only lineage inside the Windsors that still holds a princess identity in stable public sentiment currency without undermining the crown's long arc optics endorsements. Second, Alexandra, by seniority, is one of the monarchy's longest conduit living endorsers. Someone who remembers the Queen Mother's actual emotional calculus chain, not just the public PR geometry of it. Third, Alexandra is not politically ambitious. She is reputationally anchored. Catherine is politically silent. She is emotionally narratable. 4. Catherine is mother of a future sovereign on paper. Alexandra is the last sovereign-adjacent endorsement bearer in lineage memory. 5. Alexandra outranks Camilla ceremonially. But even more importantly, outranks her eligibility for emotional heirloom routing entirely, because the vault remembers lineage identity, not marriage line optics rehabilitation obligations alone. This alliance is structurally powerful because Alexandra carries the key by generational seniority. Catherine carries the narratability endurance by public sentiment stability optics. Camilla carries the crown title, but not the vault password. And the monarchy carries the institution behind all of them. Now let's take a breath and speak directly to the audience again to keep this on retention rails. Have you ever seen a royal alliance speak louder than scandals without a single sentence ever being spoken? Because that's the brilliance here. The monarchy didn't have to say Catherine was trusted with the emotional queen, mother, jewel ledger archetype continuity. The vault said it by opening for her. Now we flash forward again to 2025. Catherine is 43, Camilla is 78. Alexandra is 88. We're witnessing a transfer that spans 90 years of Windsor optics. The monarchy is operating under the oldest rule. Inheritance passes through the safest conduits who can carry the oldest narratives without upsetting the present ceremonial crown branding economy that lives or dies by narratability alignment rather than marriage acceptance battle wins alone. The press kept talking about generational fractures. The vault kept tracking generational continuities. Alexandra saw that Catherine, unlike Camilla, could be a long-form royal myth carrier without attempting to politically own the legacy more aggressively than she could quietly wear it. Alexandra saw someone who could finish a story without turning it into a fight. Alexandra saw continuity value over trending entitlement performance debt. And most importantly, Alexandra saw that Catherine was the monarchy's safest future heirloom wearer in story, even if not crowned sovereign today by ceremony yet. And here's the emotional undercurrent most people never interrogate. Catherine's relationship to Diana's sons is not proximity. It's generational symmetry. She is the mother of heirs Diana can't claim publicly anymore. She carries an emotionally endorsed fairy tale love arc without destabilizing the monarchy. Camilla's arc is earned acceptance through noise and rehabilitation. Catherine's arc is inherited stability through silence and narratability endurance. And Alexandra has no tolerance for noise-corrupting heirlooms that were curated specifically to avoid absorption into state optics monopoly pipeline rather than family optics hierarchy preservation. She handed Catherine the key not because the public demanded it, but because the public retroactively values what Alexandra endorsed internally first. Ask yourself this to relight retention. Why would a 20th century legend keep a private vault that isn't anchored to ceremony, but anchored to lineage endorsement weight maths that always pick the princess who can carry IRL story arcs 40-plus years into the future without crushing the institution that needs to keep telling it? The answer is Catherine. The bearer is Alexandra. The silence is the protocol. The transfer is the declaration. And now for your cliffhanger chapter exit line. As promised, punchy, open, unresolved. But if Alexandra and Catherine can form a legacy alliance invisible to the public for decades, that means the monarchy's inheritance network isn't collapsing. It's evolving. And if one vault key could shake perception this hard, imagine what happens when the monarchy opens the next one. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. But what came next would change everything. That was the promise, the tease, the lure we ended on. And you're still here. Which means the curiosity gap worked. Now let's ignite it again with a simmering, almost forbidden question. Is Queen Camilla being bypassed unprecedented? Or is it simply a tradition older than cameras that the royal family has resurrected when they realized Catherine was the safer future to crown in story? Because to understand why Princess Alexandra could hand Catherine jewels Camilla has never touched, we have to understand an uncomfortable truth. The monarchy runs on at least two parallel power systems at all times. One is the public crown system, titles, coronations, balcony optics, official duties, televised symbolism. The other is the legacy system, heirlooms, vault keys, family seniority, emotional endorsements, invisible power transfers, generational trust networks. Camilla dominates the first. Alexandra controls access to the second. Catherine is the recipient designed to elevate the first while stabilizing the second. Most narratives fail here because they treat monarchy like a pyramid, when it's actually a dual-lane roundabout where jewelry vault keys are exit ramps, not trophies. Historically, the royal family has always passed personal jewelry collections through family conduit seniority rather than direct crown absorption. For the most part, this was done with surgical discretion. Tiaras, brooches, diamond clips, bracelets, and pearl clusters that belonged personally to monarchs or senior royals were passed not necessarily to whoever was queen of the moment, but to whoever was princess of the continuity arc. Some pieces remained with trustees who themselves were senior enough to decide distribution after the original owner passed. The Queen Mother's jewelry vault was never part of the crown property ledger. She fought to protect its private nature so it could be distributed later without constitutional oversight. It was emotional insurance disguised as gemstones. Now, public tradition watchers believed for decades that as soon as Camilla became consort, the Windsor heirloom economy would automatically route to her by crown adjacency. But adjacency doesn't equal eligibility in personal legacy transfer lanes. And that nuance is what makes royal vault decisions feel alien, unfair, confusing, or like betrayal, depending on which camera system you live in. Let's interrogate Camilla's position in 2025 through this dual-lane monarchy system. Public crown tradition says Camilla is queen consort, married to the sovereign, enjoying gradual public rehabilitation after a lifetime lived in the shadow of the Princess of Wales narrative. And yes, she earned legitimacy through unimaginable media turbulence, a PR campaign that rewrote her public story arc, diplomatic and charity circuits, televised acceptance warmth pipelines, palace balcony protocols, public diplomacy dinners, news cycles that slowly stopped booing her, poll numbers rising by endurance, and the monarchy leaning into her public acceptance timeline optics strategy aggressively. She is monarchy's most rehabilitated public queen figure. One of the greatest PR turnarounds of all time. That is System 1. But System 2, legacy routing tradition, doesn't trust rehabilitation arcs. It trusts womb-to-walkabout conduits who don't destabilize continuity by demanding legacy ownership performance control. Camilla wanted to wear the crown in ceremony. Absolutely acceptable by System 1. The Queen Mother's vault, however, was built to avoid state operational oversight influence entirely. Camilla never touched the Queen Mother's emotional administrative router, because the Queen Mother understood that the Princess of Wales' identity was the emotional anchor the public will always return to whether monarchy likes it or not. And she also understood that any consort who enters through a rival narrative to Diana may wear a crown, but will never wear heirlooms anchored to Diana-defined Wales' symbolism memory without looking like an optics collision event. The vault wasn't sealed because it was over. It was sealed because it was waiting for stability, waiting for optics alignment, waiting for the next narratability heir, waiting for someone whose emotional public acceptance doesn't threaten the institution. Catherine was that person. Camilla wasn't. Now let's add historical weight to tradition itself. Since retention demands we spike curiosity repeatedly, royal jewel traditions from the Queen Mother's era followed two implicit rules. 1. Personal jewelry must stay personal, not national. 2. Distribution happens through lineage optics continuity channels approved by the most senior living conduits, not merely by marriage titles. Alexandra Ogilvy is one of the last British royals ceremonially senior enough to be a trustee of emotional vault access math without shaking the institution. She carries crown adjacency memory from before 1950s. She embodies the continuity audit more than she performs the role. And that makes her the safest disruptor for legacy transfers during eras of public narrative storms. Catherine didn't steal the spotlight. She inherited its optics without eruptive PR flares. And Alexandra handing her the Queen Mother's jewels accomplishes something monarchy cares about deeply but never says publicly. A signal to the family, to insiders, to trustees, and to those old guard vault stewards that generational loyalty has pivoted, and it pivoted to the princess who carries the Wales storyline without destabilizing the crown hegemony, not to the queen who carries the crown by politically inherited marriage adjacency acceptance optics battle wins alone. That might sound complex. Monarchies are complex. But the transfer was simple in execution. One gloved hand, one protocol-aware nod, one key turned silently, without CCTV helping public explanation optics at all. Now let's turn the emotional amplitude dial again, because retention rules demand it. Here's the real rub, the silent political spite that powers this entire chapter. The Queen Mother's personal vault was designed to be distributed not by a crown held, but by the crown anticipated. By 2025, after decades of real-life conflicts, reconciliations, PR rehabilitation arcs, royal documentaries, family media fragmentation episodes capturing public attention away from the internal inheritance router, the monarchy finally asked itself, who can still carry an emotionally exported Princess of Wales identity without destabilizing the crown or needing to justify legacy entitlement publicly in every lunch meeting? And again, the answer was Catherine. Catherine as a jewel receiver matters because the Queen Mother's legacy was coded specifically to avoid state operational oversight. Alexandra was the courier of inevitability. Catherine was the recipient of stability. Now let's ask the audience once more, because this video isn't monologue. It's dialogue with millions who can't answer, but will keep watching anyway. Do you think Camilla didn't know about the vault? Or do you now suspect she knew about it, but also knew she wasn't vaulted into the emotional conduit lineage audit math as eligible to receive it long before Alexandra ever turned the key for Catherine? Because sometimes knowledge without eligibility hurts worse than ignorance without responsibility. But if the vault moved to Catherine without ceremony declaring it, that means something the monarchy refuses to articulate aloud is already in play. Inheritance pathways inside royal walls operate on future stability tree-off, not present crown entitlement. Camilla was bypassed not because she lacks PR rehabilitation battle wins. She was bypassed because she lacks generational internal admin influence over personal vault eligibility authority that predates Charles's consort era altogether. And now for the cliffhanger transition you didn't know your pulse was waiting for. Unresolved and hung like a chandelier over the next hour of narrative build-up. If tradition can override adjacency so completely in silence, if a senior royal can deliver jewels without crown absorption document filings ever influencing it, then the monarchy hasn't broken tradition. It has used tradition to declare who carries its next 50-year narratability arc best. And that means Camilla losing this key moment might not be the end of the story. It might be the beginning of an inheritance re-ranking era nobody has forecast publicly yet. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. But what came next would change everything. That echo is still hanging in the air. So let's begin with the same spark that kept you watching for 3 straight chapters. Do you think the monarchy feared Catherine having those jewels? Or do you now realize the monarchy feared who she wouldn't give them back to? Because this chapter isn't about gemstones. This is about the invisible rivalry between 2 royal identity engines, the Wales story engine and the Crown stage engine. And the jewels just exposed which one is powering the next 50-year plan. The monarchy has endured centuries because its real conflicts are never fought in public, where they can be edited into tabloids or docuseries cliffhangers. They're fought in loyalty transfers, facial micro-expressions at luncheons, who gets invited to which rooms, whose handshake still works as diplomatic currency, and, most importantly, who gets access to what was kept private by someone more beloved than the role that followed them. By 2025, we live in a monarchy era defined by 2 irreconcilable optics systems. Camilla carries the crown stage. Visible, official, politically rehabilitated, increasingly accepted by the public because the monarchy told everyone to clap long enough that applause began to sound voluntary. Catherine, however, carries the Wales engine, a title that no sovereign crown legally owns, but emotionally every generation wants to narrate again. Diana didn't just elevate the Wales title, she immortalized it. And since her death, the royal family has been trying to stabilize which lane of symbolism will carry the monarchy into its next century without destabilization optics debt. The crown is power by ceremony. The Wales title is power by story endurance. The Queen Mother personally endorsed the Wales optics identity repeatedly in life, not through documents, but through jewelry signals that were personal, not institutional. So the vault inherited not crown authority, but crown narrative memory authority. What Alexandra and Catherine represent together is a corrective alignment. Not rebellion. Corrective alignment. Because rebellion is loud, and Alexandra does nothing loud. Catherine's acceptance is loud, but her ambition is quiet. That combination is monarchy oxygen. Fire can't breathe in regal rooms. But quiet inevitability swims through firestorms like a dolphin wearing a pearl necklace. Now let's talk about the Sussex factor without ever making this about the Sussexes alone, because the monarchy's current generational battles are never siloed. They're cross-pollinated into every optics decision. The Sussex era created a global media storm where the monarchy's first-lane optics flared into international PR feuds, on-set contract dramatization narratives, public documentary diplomacy feuds, and accusations of sabotage that felt louder because the press was focused in that direction. But the monarchy moved its internal succession symbols quietly, while public outrage protected the institution's ability to shift legacy lanes without explanation. And here's the key emotional pivot for retention that most monarchy fans never factor into the narrative cleanly. Personal jewels carry symbolic endorsement for who the family wants to carry next public sentiment story arcs without undermining the institution. They were kept private because private means distribution by family calculus, not by state signatures. And the calculus was this: Catherine can be photographed in the jewels without causing public optics debt. Camilla wearing them would relaunch the Diana collision narrative, destabilizing the crown stage. Alexandra holds seniority plus emotional trust to execute vault access routing. The monarchy needs to export the whale's identity renewal engine without exporting a consort conflict engine that triggers public collapse optics liability. That's your math. That's your invisible protocol. And that's why the vault recognized Catherine's fingerprint, not Camilla's. Most monarchies fall because they miscalculate optics endurance. The Windsors survive because Elizabeth II's generation quietly calibrated optics to avoid absorption collisions. But the whale's identity remained the royal family's strongest emotional economy lane. The Queen Mother's vault simply preserved the only thing monarchy can't rehabilitate by PR: generational public storyworthiness. Alexandra didn't hand Catherine diamonds. She handed Catherine the monarchy's story lane renewal assignability admin key. Now let's ask again, because every 5 minutes of runtime should make the audience interrogate monarchy systems, not just monarchy characters. Do you think Catherine is the monarchy's future because she received the jewels? Or do you now suspect Catherine received the jewels because the monarchy already decided her story future optics are safer for renewability than Camilla's rehabilitated present crown adjacency conflict optics risk exposure? And if so, how long has the whale's engine actually been outranking the crown camera's staging, without us ever seeing it? Because look at what these jewels actually accomplish in the internal institution. They visually confirm Catherine without requiring speeches. They bypass Camilla without creating headline justification optics friction. They let Alexandra intervene without intervening loudly. They set the emotional optics stage for who gets narratability authority next. They keep the monarchy's strongest female story symbol export alive inside the whale's lane without triggering consort rivalry turbulence eruptions publicly at any lunch ceremony compliance optics miscalculation. Now, the monarchy's job isn't to announce internal loyalty transfers. It's to manage who the world will applaud.